I don't know why you're making a fuss over it, Naomi. It's just a ring, Sylvia sneered. You people always want to hold on to things that don't belong to you. Naomi's chest tightened, her breath shallow as she fought the urge to scream. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. That ring belonged to my grandmother. It's been in my family for generations. Sylvia waved her hand dismissively. Well, it's in good hands now. I'm keeping it safe. Safe from what? From me? Naomi's voice rose, echoing through the spacious living room of the Reynolds family home. Henry stepped between them, his face etched with worry. Mom, please. Just give Naomi her ring back. Sylvia's eyes narrowed. Henry, darling, don't you see? I'm doing this for you. For us. Something should stay in the family. I am family, Naomi said, her words sharp and clear. Sylvia's lips curled into a cold smile. Are you really, dear? The silence that followed was deafening. Naomi looked at Henry, waiting for him to say something to defend her. But he remained quiet, his gaze fixed on the floor. I can't believe this, Naomi muttered, grabbing her purse. I have a meeting to get to. We'll discuss this later. As she stormed out, she heard Sylvia's voice, saccharine sweet. Have a good day at work, dear. Don't let this little misunderstanding upset you. Naomi slammed the car door, her hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a connection to her past, to the strong women who came before her. And now it was in the hands of a woman who saw her as nothing more than an intruder. Her phone buzzed. A text from Henry. I'm sorry. I'll talk to her. Love you. Naomi didn't respond. She started the car and drove to her studio, her mind racing. This wasn't the first time Sylvia had pulled something like this, but it was by far the most blatant. The constant microaggressions, the backhanded compliments, the way she'd introduced Naomi as Henry's wife instead of by her name, it all came flooding back. At the studio, Chloe was waiting for her. One look at Naomi's face, and she knew something was wrong. What did that witch do now? Chloe asked, pulling Naomi into a hug. Naomi recounted the morning's events, her voice cracking as she reached the end. And Henry just stood there, Chloe. He didn't say a word. Chloe shook her head. That boy needs to grow a spine. How long are you going to put up with this? I don't know, Naomi admitted. I love Henry, but his mother, it's like she's determined to prove I don't belong. You belong wherever you damn well please, Chloe said firmly. Don't let her make you doubt yourself. Naomi nodded, grateful for her friend's support. She glanced at the clock. The buyers will be here soon. I need to focus. As she laid out her latest jewelry designs, Naomi tried to push the morning's confrontation from her mind. But Sylvia's words kept echoing in her head. You people always want to hold on to things that don't belong to you. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here was Sylvia, literally holding on to something that belonged to Naomi, while accusing her of the same thing. The meeting went well, despite Naomi's distraction. Her designs were praised, orders were placed, and for a few hours, she was able to lose herself in her work. But as the last client left, the reality of her situation came crashing back. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Henry. Mom says she'll give the ring back if you apologize for overreacting. Naomi stared at the screen in disbelief. Apologize? For what? For wanting back what was rightfully hers? She typed out a reply, her fingers flying over the keys. I'm not apologizing for anything. If she doesn't return the ring, I'm coming to get it myself. As she hit send, a cold determination settled over her. Enough was enough. If Sylvia wanted a fight, she'd get one. Naomi was done playing nice, done trying to fit into a family that clearly didn't want her. She looked up at Chloe, who was watching her with concern. I think it's time I showed Sylvia exactly who she's dealing with. Chloe grinned. Now that's what I'm talking about. What's the plan? Naomi smiled, a plan already forming in her mind. First, we get that ring back. Then, we show Sylvia what it really means to lose something that belongs to you. As they began to plot, Naomi felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was done being the victim in Sylvia's game. It was time to change the rules. Naomi stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her fingers tracing the empty space on her hand where her grandmother's ring should have been. The confrontation with Sylvia still burned in her mind, But it was Henry's silence that truly stung. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Naomi, are you okay? Henry's voice was tentative, unsure. She opened the door, meeting his concerned gaze. No, Henry, I'm not okay. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I'm sorry about what happened with Mom. You know how she can be sometimes. Naomi's jaw clenched. Sometimes? Henry, this isn't just sometimes. This is every time we're around her. And you just stand there. Henry ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. What am I supposed to do? She's my mother. And I'm your wife, Naomi countered. But it seems like that doesn't matter when she's involved. A heavy silence fell between them. Henry broke it first. I'll talk to her. I'll get the ring back. Naomi shook her head. That's not the point, Henry. It's not just about the ring. It's about respect. It's about belonging. Every time your mother looks at me, it's like she's seeing an intruder, not family. Henry's face softened. She doesn't mean it like that. She's just set in her ways. The phrase ignited something in Naomi. Set in her ways? Is that what we're calling racism now? Henry flinched as if he'd been slapped. That's not fair. My mom's not racist. She's just what, Henry? Naomi's voice was dangerously low. Just happens to treat me differently because of the color of my skin? Just happens to make snide comments about my kind? Just happens to think I'm not good enough for her precious son? Henry's silence was deafening. Naomi grabbed her purse, unable to bear the tension any longer. I'm going to the studio. I need some space. As she drove, Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. How'd it go with Henry? Did you get the ring back? Naomi pulled over, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She dialed Chloe's number. Hey girl, what's wrong? Chloe's voice was warm, concerned. Naomi let out a shaky breath. Henry, he just doesn't get it. He keeps making excuses for her. Chloe's sigh crackled through the speaker. I hate to say I told you so, but I know, Naomi interrupted. But what am I supposed to do? I love Chloe, but I can't keep living like this. You need to make a stand, Chloe said firmly. Henry needs to understand that this isn't just about his mother being difficult. This is about your dignity, your place in that family. Naomi nodded, even though Chloe couldn't see her. You're right. I don't know how to make him see it. Then show him, Chloe replied. Next time Sylvia pulls something, don't let it slide. Make Henry see exactly what's happening. As if on cue, Naomi's phone buzzed with another text. This time from Sylvia. Naomi, dear, I hope you've calmed down. I'd like you and Henry to join me for dinner tonight. We have some things to discuss. Naomi's grip tightened on the phone. Chloe, I gotta go. Sylvia just invited us to dinner. Perfect, Chloe said, a hint of mischief in her voice. Time to show Henry and Sylvia exactly who they're dealing with. Naomi ended the call, a mix of dread and determination settling in her stomach. She texted Henry, Your mother invited us to dinner. I'll meet you there. As she drove to Sylvia's house, Naomi steeled herself for what was to come. She was done playing nice, done trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for her. It was time to show Sylvia and Henry the strong, successful woman she truly was. Pulling up to the grand house, Naomi took a deep breath. She checked her reflection one last time, smoothing her hair and straightening her shoulders. Whatever Sylvia had planned for tonight, Naomi was ready. She rang the doorbell, the sound echoing ominously through the house. As footsteps approached, Naomi squared her shoulders. Tonight, everything would change. She would make sure of it. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton buzzed with the chatter of Atlanta's elite. Naomi stood at the entrance, her hand resting lightly on Henry's arm, feeling like an imposter in her own skin. Sylvia had insisted they attend this charity gala, claiming it would be good for business. But Naomi knew better. This was just another opportunity for Sylvia to parade her around like some exotic trophy. There you are, Sylvia's voice cut through the crowd. She approached, resplendent in a designer gown, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Naomi, dear, you look interesting. How brave of you to wear something so ethnic. Naomi felt Henry stiffen beside her, but remained silent. She forced a smile. Thank you, Sylvia. Your dress is lovely too. Sylvia beamed, completely missing the sarcasm. Come, let me introduce you to some people. They're dying to meet Henry's wife. As they made their way through the crowd, Naomi felt the weight of curious stares. Sylvia's introductions were a masterclass in backhanded compliments. This is Naomi, Henry's wife. She makes jewelry. Isn't that quaint? Naomi here has quite the rags to riches story. It's so inspiring, don't you think? With each introduction, Naomi's smile grew tighter, her grip on Henry's arm stronger. But Henry remained silent, laughing awkwardly at his mother's comments. The breaking point came when Sylvia, surrounded by a group of her socialite friends, raised her voice just enough to be heard. It's so refreshing to see someone like Naomi succeed despite her background, don't you think? The group tittered, their laughter like nails on a chalkboard to Naomi's ears. She felt her cheeks burn, humiliation and anger warring within her. "Excuse me," she muttered, breaking away from Henry and making her way to the balcony. The cool night air was a welcome relief from the suffocating atmosphere inside. She heard footsteps behind her and turned, expecting, hoping, to see Henry. Instead, it was Sylvia, her face a mask of concern. "Naomi, dear, are you all right? You look flushed. I hope you're not coming down with something." Naomi took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'm fine, Sylvia. Just needed some air." Sylvia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You know, if these events are too much for you, you don't have to come. I'm sure Henry would understand." "These events aren't too much for me," Naomi replied, her voice steady. "Your behavior, on the other hand." Sylvia's eyes widened in mock innocence. "My behavior? Whatever do you mean?" "The constant digs, the backhanded compliments, the way you introduce me, as if I'm some curiosity you picked up at a yard sale. It needs to stop." Sylvia's facade cracked for a moment, a flash of anger crossing her face before it smoothed back into a placid smile. "Oh, Naomi, you're being overly sensitive. I'm just trying to help you fit in." "Fit in?" Naomi laughed bitterly. "You've made it clear from day one that you don't think I belong here. With Henry, in this social circle, in this family." Sylvia's smile faltered. "Now, that's not true. I've always been welcoming dash." "Welcoming?" Naomi interrupted. "Is that what you call taking my grandmother's ring? Belittling my work? Constantly reminding everyone of my background?" Sylvia's mask slipped completely, her voice turning cold. "Listen here, Naomi. I've worked hard to build this life, this social standing. I won't have you jeopardizing it with your... My what, Sylvia? My blackness?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. Sylvia opened her mouth to respond, but was cut off by Henry's arrival. "There you are," he said, oblivious to the tension. "Mom, the Johnsons are looking for you. Something about the charity auction?" Sylvia composed herself quickly. "Of course. We'll continue this discussion later, Naomi." She swept back into the ballroom, leaving Naomi and Henry alone on the balcony. Henry turned to Naomi, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay? You've been quiet all evening." Naomi looked at her husband, really looked at him. She saw the man she loved, but also the boy still tethered to his mother's apron strings. In that moment, she made a decision. "No, Henry, I'm not okay, and I don't think I will be until you start seeing what's really going on here." As she walked back into the ballroom, head held high, Naomi felt a shift. The ground beneath her feet was no longer shaky. She was done trying to fit into Sylvia's world. It was time to make her own. Naomi's fingers trembled as she scrolled through her phone, reading the text message for the 100th time. It was from Marcus, one of Henry's oldest friends. "Hey, Naomi, I hope this isn't out of line, but I thought you should know. Sylvia's been talking. She's telling people you only married Henry for his money. I know it's not true, but I thought you deserved to know." She felt sick. After the disaster at the charity event, Naomi had hoped things would improve. Instead, they'd gotten worse. The studio door opened, and Chloe walked in, her smile fading as she saw Naomi's face. "What happened?" Wordlessly, Naomi handed her the phone. Chloe's eyes widened as she read. "That witch," she hissed. "Naomi, you have to confront her about this." "And say what?" Naomi's voice cracked. That she's a liar? A racist? We both know she'll just deny it. Then confront Henry, Chloe insisted. He needs to know what his mother is doing. Naomi nodded, her resolve strengthening. You're right. This ends now. That evening, Naomi waited for Henry to return from work. When he walked in, she was sitting at the kitchen table, her face set in grim determination. Naomi? What's wrong? Henry asked, concern etching his features. She slid her phone across the table. Read it. Henry's face paled as he read Marcus's message. This can't be right. My mother wouldn't. Wouldn't what, Henry? Naomi's voice was sharp. Wouldn't spread lies about me? Wouldn't try to undermine our marriage? Because that's exactly what she's doing. Henry sat heavily in the chair opposite her. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Maybe Marcus heard wrong. Naomi felt a surge of anger. A misunderstanding? Like at the charity event? Or when she took my grandmother's ring? How many misunderstandings are you going to let slide before you admit what's really going on? What are you saying? Henry's voice was defensive now. I'm saying your mother is a racist, Henry. She's been trying to push me out since day one, and you've been too blind to see it. Henry stood up abruptly. That's not fair. My mother isn't perfect, but she's not a racist. She's just protective. Naomi laughed bitterly. Protective? Is that what you call it when she tells people that Naomi's kind are always looking for a way to climb up? Henry's face went slack with shock. She said that? Yes, Henry. She did. And it's not the first time, just the first time you're hearing about it. A heavy silence fell between them. Henry paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. What do you want me to do? He finally asked. I want you to stand up for me, Naomi said, her voice breaking. I want you to tell your mother that her behavior is unacceptable. I want you to choose me. Henry's face contorted with conflict. Naomi, she's my mother. I can't just cut her out of my life. And I'm your wife, Naomi countered. But it seems like that doesn't matter when she's involved. Henry reached for her hand, but Naomi pulled away. We need to distance ourselves from her, he said. Give her some time to come around. Naomi stood up, shaking her head. No, Henry. That's not enough. Your mother isn't going to come around. She's going to keep pushing and pushing until she breaks us apart. What are you saying? Henry's voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying I can't do this anymore. I can't keep fighting a battle on two fronts, against your mother's racism and your willful blindness. Henry's face crumpled. Naomi, please. We can work this out. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the boy still tethered to his mother's apron strings. In that moment, she made a decision. I'm going to stay with Chloe for a while, she said, her voice steady. I need some time to think about whether this marriage can work if you can't see what's really going on. As she packed a bag, Naomi felt a strange mix of sorrow and relief. She loved Henry, but she loved herself more. And she was done dimming her light to make others comfortable. Before she left, she turned to Henry one last time. When you're ready to see the truth, to really see it, you know where to find me. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Henry alone in the silence of their home, faced with a choice that would define the rest of his life. The weeks following Naomi's departure were a blur of sleepless nights and tense phone calls. Henry, caught between his love for Naomi and his loyalty to his mother, found himself at a crossroads. Naomi threw herself into her work, expanding her jewelry line and securing a major contract with a high-end department store. One crisp autumn morning, as Naomi was preparing for a crucial meeting, her phone buzzed with a text from Henry. Mom wants to meet. Says it's important. Please come. Naomi's stomach churned. She'd been avoiding Sylvia, focusing on healing and building her strength. But she knew this confrontation was inevitable. That evening, Naomi found herself standing outside Sylvia's imposing Victorian home. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. Sylvia opened the door, her usual polished facade slightly cracked. Naomi, thank you for coming. Please come in. The living room was tense. Henry perched uncomfortably on the edge of the sofa. Sylvia gestured for Naomi to sit, then cleared her throat. I've asked you both here because I need your help, Sylvia began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I'm planning to renovate the house, and I need a significant investment. It's for Henry's future, of course. A family legacy. Naomi's eyebrows shot up. And you want us to finance this renovation? Sylvia nodded, a hint of her old entitlement creeping back. It's a sound investment. This house has been in the family for generations. It's part of Henry's heritage. Naomi glanced at Henry, who looked conflicted. She turned back to Sylvia, her voice steady. No, no. Sylvia's composure slipped. What do you mean, no? I mean, we won't be investing in your renovation, Sylvia. This house isn't our future. It's your past. Sylvia's face reddened. Henry, surely you see the importance of this? It's your birthright. Henry shifted uncomfortably. Mom, I don't know. You don't know? Sylvia's voice rose. This ungrateful woman has turned you against your own family, your own legacy. Naomi stood, her patience wearing thin. That's enough, Sylvia. Your legacy is built on prejudice and entitlement. We're not going to prop it up any longer. Sylvia's eyes flashed with fury. You don't belong in this family. You never have, and you never will. The room fell silent, the weight of Sylvia's words hanging in the air. Naomi looked at Henry, waiting for him to speak up, to defend her. But he remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. In that moment, Naomi made her decision. She turned to Henry, her voice calm but firm. It's time to choose, Henry. Your mother's legacy or our future together. Henry's head snapped up, his eyes wide. Naomi, please. Can we find a compromise? Naomi shook her head. There's no compromising with hate, Henry. It's her or me. Sylvia scoffed. Don't be dramatic, Naomi. Henry knows where his loyalties lie. But Henry was silent, his face a mask of turmoil. Naomi waited, her heart pounding, for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Henry stood. I'm sorry, Mom, but Naomi's right. This ends now. Sylvia's face crumpled in disbelief. Henry, you can't be serious. You'd choose her over your own mother? Your own blood? Henry took Naomi's hand, his grip firm. Family isn't just about blood, Mom. It's about love, respect, and acceptance. Something you've never shown Naomi. Sylvia's shock turned to rage. Get out, both of you. You're throwing away everything I've built for you, Henry. Everything your father and I worked for. As they walked out, Naomi could hear Sylvia's angry sobs echoing through the house. She felt a mix of triumph and sadness. Triumph that Henry had finally stood up to his mother, but sadness at the cost. In the car, Henry was quiet, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Naomi reached over and placed her hand on his. Are you okay? She asked softly. Henry took a shaky breath. I don't know, but I know I made the right choice. As they drove away from Sylvia's house, Naomi felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. Little did they know, Sylvia's desperate attempt to maintain control would set in motion a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. The true test of their relationship, and Sylvia's reckoning, was yet to come. The Atlanta social scene buzzed with whispers and sidelong glances as Sylvia Reynolds made her way through the annual Garden Club fundraiser. Once the queen bee of these events, she now found herself on the outskirts, her usual coterie of admirers noticeably absent. Did you hear? A voice murmured behind a floral arrangement. Sylvia's investment in that real estate venture went belly up. She's lost almost everything. Sylvia's grip tightened on her champagne flute, her carefully manicured nails digging into her palm. She'd gambled big, hoping to restore her dwindling finances and show Henry what he was missing by choosing Naomi over her. Instead, she'd lost it all. As she scanned the room, her eyes locked with those of Beatrice Holbrook, her oldest friend and confidant. Beatrice quickly averted her gaze, turning to engage in conversation with another guest. The snub was unmistakable. Sylvia felt her world tilting on its axis. This was her domain, her kingdom, and now it was slipping through her fingers like sand. Across town, Naomi sat in her studio, putting the finishing touches on her latest collection. Her phone buzzed with a text from Henry. Mom's investment failed. She's lost almost everything. She's been calling nonstop, begging for help. Naomi's heart raced. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. the karmic retribution she'd dreamed of. But the victory felt hollow. "What are you going to do?" she texted back. Henry's response was immediate. "I don't know. Part of me wants to help, but—" Naomi understood his hesitation. Despite everything, Sylvia was still his mother. But they'd made a promise to each other, to break free from Sylvia's toxic influence. "We agreed, Henry," Naomi reminded him gently. "We can't keep enabling her behavior." As she hit send, a notification popped up on her phone. It was an email from Vogue, confirming her feature in next month's issue. Naomi's heart swelled with pride. She'd worked hard for this, fought against prejudice and doubt to make a name for herself. And now, as Sylvia's star was falling, hers was on the rise. The irony wasn't lost on her. Back at the fundraiser, Sylvia stumbled out onto the terrace, desperate for air. The weight of her failures pressed down on her, suffocating. She fumbled with her phone, dialing Henry's number for the 100th time. "Henry, please," she sobbed when he finally answered. "I need your help. I've lost everything. The house, my savings. I don't know what to do." Henry's voice was strained. "Mom, I'm sorry, but I can't bail you out of this." Naomi and I agreed. "Naomi," Sylvia spat the name like a curse. "So, she's pulling your strings now? Turning you against your own mother?" "No, Mom," Henry's voice hardened. "This is my decision. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." The line went dead, leaving Sylvia alone with her despair. As the sun set over Atlanta, casting long shadows across the city, Naomi and Henry sat on their balcony, a bottle of wine between them. "I feel guilty," Henry admitted, swirling the red liquid in his glass. "I know she's toxic, but she's still my mother." Naomi reached out, taking his hand. "I know, babe, but sometimes love means setting boundaries. Your mother needs to learn that her actions have consequences." Henry nodded, squeezing her hand. "You're right. It's just, I never thought it would come to this." As they sat in contemplative silence, Naomi's phone chimed. It was a news alert. Socialite Sylvia Reynolds files for bankruptcy amid failed investment scandal. The headline felt like the final nail in the coffin of Sylvia's reign. Naomi showed it to Henry, watching as a mix of emotions played across his face. "It's over," he said softly. "Her social standing, her influence, it's all gone." Naomi nodded, a bittersweet feeling washing over her. Maybe now she'll finally understand. Maybe this will be the wake-up call she needs. But even as she said it, Naomi knew it was unlikely. People like Sylvia rarely changed, even in the face of total loss. More likely, she'd find a way to twist this, to paint herself as the victim and Naomi as the villain. As if on cue, Naomi's phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. You'll never truly be part of this family. Never." Naomi showed the message to Henry, watching as his face hardened with resolve. "Enough," he said, taking the phone and blocking the number. "It's time to cut ties completely. No more chances, no more excuses." As they clinked glasses, sealing their pact, Naomi felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Sylvia's fall from grace was complete, her power over them finally broken. But as the night deepened, a nagging feeling persisted in the back of Naomi's mind. Sylvia, cornered and desperate, was more dangerous than ever. The final confrontation was coming, and Naomi knew she'd need all her strength to face it. The doorbell rang, its chime echoing through Naomi and Henry's home like a warning. Naomi froze, her hand hovering over her latest jewelry design. She knew who it was before Henry even called out. "Naomi," Henry's voice was tense. "It's my mother." Taking a deep breath, Naomi steeled herself and walked to the foyer. There stood Sylvia, a shadow of her former self. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her hair unkempt. The polished facade had crumbled, revealing the desperate woman beneath. "What are you doing here, Sylvia?" Naomi asked, her voice steady. Sylvia's eyes darted between Naomi and Henry, wild with a mix of anger and desperation. "I've come to talk some sense into my son," she spat. "Henry, you can't throw away everything we've built, everything your father and I sacrificed for." Henry stepped forward, placing himself between Naomi and his mother. Mom, we've been over this. Your choices led you here, not us. Sylvia's face contorted with rage. My choices? I did everything for you. And this woman has turned you against me. Naomi felt a surge of anger, but she pushed it down, determined to remain calm. Sylvia, I've never turned Henry against you. Your actions did that all on their own. Liar! Sylvia shrieked, her composure completely shattered. You've manipulated him from the start. You and your kind, always trying to take what isn't yours. The racial undertones of Sylvia's words hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Henry recoiled as if he'd been slapped. Mom, that's enough, he said, his voice hard. You need to leave. Now! But Sylvia was beyond reason. She lunged forward, her hand outstretched as if to grab Naomi. Give me back my son. Give me back my life. Henry caught his mother's arm, holding her back. Stop it, Mom. This is exactly why we can't have you in our lives anymore. Sylvia collapsed against Henry, her body racked with sobs. How could you do this to me? After everything I've done for you? Naomi watched the scene unfold, a strange calm settling over her. She realized that this moment wasn't about her anymore. It was about Sylvia finally facing the consequences of her actions. Sylvia, Naomi said softly, causing both Henry and his mother to look at her. I never took anything from you. You gave it all away with your hate. The words seemed to penetrate Sylvia's hysteria. She stared at Naomi, her eyes wide with shock. What? Your prejudice, your manipulation, your refusal to see me as a person worthy of your son's love. That's what cost you everything. Not me. Not Henry. You. Sylvia's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time, Naomi saw a flicker of understanding in the older woman's eyes. Henry gently disentangled himself from his mother's grasp. She's right, Mom. Your actions pushed us away. Your refusal to accept Naomi, to see her as family, that's what destroyed our relationship. Sylvia stumbled back, her face a mask of confusion and dawning realization. I never meant. Yes, you did, Naomi said, her voice firm but not unkind. Every backhanded compliment, every snide remark about my background, every attempt to undermine our relationship. You meant all of it. And now you're facing the consequences. Sylvia's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. She looked around the home Naomi and Henry had built together, seeing for the first time the life she was no longer a part of. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered, her voice small and broken. Henry sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if you can, Mom. Some things can't be undone. Naomi stepped forward, surprising herself with what she was about to say. But some things can be learned from. If you're willing to truly look at yourself, to confront your prejudices and try to change, maybe there's hope. Sylvia looked at Naomi, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. I don't know if I can. That's your choice to make, Naomi said. But until you do, we can't have you in our lives. Henry nodded, standing firm beside his wife. We're a package deal, Mom. Either you accept both of us, or you lose us both. Sylvia's gaze darted between them, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. Without another word, she turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the echoes of years of conflict and pain. As the door closed, Naomi felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She turned to Henry, seeing the mix of sorrow and relief on his face. Are you okay? She asked softly. Henry pulled her into a tight embrace. I am now, he murmured into her hair. We are now. As they stood there, holding each other in the aftermath of the confrontation, Naomi knew that while the battle was over, the healing was just beginning. But for the first time in years, she felt truly hopeful about their future, a future free from the shadow of prejudice and pain. 6 months had passed since the confrontation with Sylvia. Naomi stood in the spacious living room of their new home, surrounded by moving boxes and the promise of a fresh start. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow on the hardwood floors. Henry entered, carrying the last box from the truck. That's the last of it, he said, setting it down with a sigh of relief. Naomi smiled, walking over to wrap her arms around him. Can you believe we're finally here? He kissed the top of her head. It feels surreal. but in the best way possible. As they began unpacking, Naomi's phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. "How's the move going? Any word from the Wicked Witch?" Naomi chuckled, showing Henry the message. He shook his head, a mix of emotions crossing his face. "I heard from Uncle Robert last week. Apparently, Mom settled into a small apartment downtown. She's struggling." Naomi squeezed his hand. "How do you feel about that?" Henry sighed. "Honestly, part of me feels guilty. But then I remember everything she put us through, and I know we made the right choice." As they continued unpacking, Naomi came across a small, velvet box. Her breath caught in her throat as she opened it, revealing her grandmother's ring, the one Sylvia had taken all those months ago. "Henry," she called out, her voice trembling. "Where did you get this?" He walked over, a soft smile on his face. "Mom returned it last week. She left it with Uncle Robert to give to me. There was a note." Naomi's eyes widened. "What did it say?" Henry pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I hope one day you can forgive me." Tears welled up in Naomi's eyes as she slipped the ring onto her finger. It felt like coming home, like reclaiming a piece of herself that had been lost. "Do you think she means it?" Naomi asked softly. Henry shrugged. "I don't know, but it's a start." As the day wore on, they transformed the empty house into a home. Photos of their life together adorned the walls. Their wedding day, vacations, moments of laughter and love. But there were also new additions. Photos of Naomi's family, her parents beaming with pride at her latest jewelry showcase, her siblings gathered for a boisterous holiday dinner. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across their new living room, Naomi and Henry stood by the large bay window, looking out at the horizon. The skyline of Atlantis stretched before them, a mix of old and new, much like their life together. "You know," Naomi said, leaning into Henry's embrace, "a part of me always feared this day would never come, that your mother's prejudice would always cast a shadow over us." Henry tightened his arms around her. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it, to stand up to her." Naomi turned in his arms, facing him. "You did stand up, Henry. When it mattered most, you chose us. You chose love over hate." He cupped her face gently. "And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." As they stood there, basking in the warmth of their new beginning, Naomi's phone chimed. It was an email notification, the final approval for her new jewelry line, set to launch in high-end stores across the country. Henry read the email over her shoulder, his face breaking into a wide grin. "You did it, babe. You really did it." Naomi felt a surge of pride and gratitude. She had fought against prejudice, against doubt, against a system that often seemed stacked against her. And she had won. "We did it," she corrected him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you by my side." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Naomi and Henry shared a deep, tender kiss. It was a kiss of promise, of triumph, of a love that had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. Later that night, as they lay in bed in their new home, Naomi reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The pain, the struggles, the moments of doubt, they had all led to this. A home filled with love, a career she was proud of, and a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. She thought of Sylvia, alone in her small apartment, and felt a twinge of sympathy. The older woman had lost so much due to her own prejudice and fear. But the returned ring offered a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, in time, healing was possible. As she drifted off to sleep, Naomi's last thoughts were of the future stretching out before them. A future bright with possibility, free from the shadows of the past. A future where love had triumphed over hate, where understanding had conquered prejudice. In that moment, nestled in Henry's arms, Naomi knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all.